go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the S&P Sports Show. I'm your host, Shawn Stewart, and we are live, by the way. Oh, let me. Okay, by the way. All right, here we go. Okay, here we go. Oh, they did that. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the S&P Sports Show. I'm your host, Shawn Stewart, and it is September the 6th, 2022. Glad to have you on this wonderful program. And it looks to me that here we go. There may be some issues on the Facebook feed. Okay, here we go. Hold on a sec. There may be issues on the Facebook feed, but we are good on the YouTube and the Twitch feed, by the way. So I don't know what the heck's happening with the YouTube, not the YouTube, but the Facebook feed. So we're going to be on YouTube and Twitch. So how you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing good, Shawn. It's Tuesday. We're back. It's another week. Week 1 of college football officially under the books. It's done. So we got that handled. Big week here with week 2 of college football coming up. And we'll begin to see the pretenders from the real teams, I think. Maybe not after week 2, because there's a lot of cupcake games going on this week. But week 3, I think, is where we're going to see the real games happen this week. Or next week, I should say. So,
all right.
But other than that, then we got NFL week 2 coming up, and a week 1 coming up, and it should be really interesting to see with these opening weeks games coming up. Lots of players are healthy, but as healthy as these players are going to get before the season comes, and injuries and everything else, and it's time to make some predictions, because we made college predictions last week. But we're going to make NFL predictions this week because we have games on Thursday, college and pro. So we'll be talking more about that in the beginning of the season and whatever week music lineup they got for the opening kickoff that we'll make fun of and everything else.
Right. And then also there's a UFC fight this Saturday, by the way, even though it's not a title fight, but that's a fight I'm still looking forward to watching that and college football at the same time.
Well, I think you got 2 guys that are going to talk a lot of trash to each other. Both of them very cocky. One on the rise. One a brash BMF legend, I guess you can say. So I think, it could be a new age begin to be ushered in the UFC, because if Diaz loses that fight, then, that can usher in a title fight, which then could usher in a whole new era possibly. But I think there's a lot of work to be done on that with that. So that'll be interesting. And, you have a UFC fight this upcoming weekend, but then the following weekend is Golovkin-Canelo 3. And this time that fight will be at 168 pounds, not at 160. But we'll save that conversation for a future episode next week, because I definitely want to talk about that fight and give my prediction for it next week. I don't think the fight is getting the hype that it deserves right now, because it's the 3rd fight, but we're not close to fight week, and Canelo coming off a loss to Bivol at 175. I think it's not getting the love that it deserves, but that's partly Canelo's fault for dragging the fight out for as long as he's made the public wait. He waited him out. He basically pulled the Floyd Mayweather, is what I'm going to call it, making Golovkin wait till he's 40. Basically what Mayweather did to Shane Mosley. He aged him out.
And Pacquiao, don't forget about that.
Yeah, well, Pacquiao wasn't as much about age as, I think, wear and tear. You know, Mayweather and Pacquiao were two different fighters. You know, one was more defensive and one just was in so many battles. And then once he got knocked out by Marquez, then it was like, oh, I guess it is okay to fight Pacquiao now because, hey, I beat Marquez earlier, even though I had a 12-pound weight advantage. But if that dude can do it, then I know I can beat him. So now I'm going to sign off on this mega fight, which I was scared to beforehand. That was kind of like a measuring stick. And, you know, Pacquiao was just in so many battles by that point that, you know, he wasn't the same fighter he was 5 or 6 fights before that. I guess you could say in his prime. He wasn't the same fighter because you've been through all those wars and battles and took all those shots. And to Floyd's credit, even though he cherry picked a lot, especially once he got to 147, he didn't take those kind of battles, which made his career longer by not taking the brutality of those wars. And a little bit of that had to do with cherry picking. Like my dog is barking right now, cherry picking for the door to be open. So, because these dogs want their mama. So,
hey, nothing wrong with that.
They're gonna cherry pick and go to their mama like Floyd cherry picked at 147. So there, everybody's even now, the dogs and Floyd. I'm not saying that Floyd wasn't a great fighter.
Nobody's not saying that.
Floyd cherry picked a lot once he was at 147. You know, I mean, he fought some people here and there, but I mean, if you look at the resume, pretty much everybody was washed up until he got to Canelo, but Canelo was young and not even close to his prime. You know, but if you look at everybody else on that list, I mean, who did he really fight that was in their prime?
I can't think of anybody.
I mean, you could say Ricky Haddon, but Ricky Haddon jumped up a weight class. Marquez jumped up 2 weight classes. I mean, everybody either jumped up a weight class, was a bum, or was way past their prime. Arturo Gatti past his prime. Zab Judah past his prime.
Right.
Shane Mosley way past his prime. Okay, and an 18-month layoff at age 41. Pacquiao took too many shots, probably past his prime. Marquez, I mean, the man came in 12, 15 pounds heavier and paid like a $700,000 fine.
That's almost like $1 million.
So, I mean, at this point, you know, I don't know what to say at this point. It's you know,
keep that topic in mind, by the way. Yeah, we'll keep that topic in mind. Thank you for bringing that up.
But we'll bring it up more next week when the boxing talk. I think we're going to be doing a lot of boxing talk next week, Thursday.
Especially since the NFL season is coming on, because we know the NFL and college football is going to be really big after this week. You know, that's for sure. Now, there was a couple of games I did watch. Now, one game, of course, I did watch Michigan and Colorado. And I said, you know what? Colorado State, thank you. I said Colorado. Because people know the difference between Colorado State and Colorado, because it's Colorado Buffaloes and the Colorado State Rams.
Yeah, don't say that to Milky Chance fans. They might get offended.
Okay.
Just saying.
But when I thought about the Michigan team, I say, you know what? I like the defense, but the offense, I'm kind of like not so confident in that offense, especially when it comes to quarterback, because I understand like the earlier the games, they did play a little bit sluggish, but it was kind of okay. Because, you know, in the month of September, Michigan's going to have an easy schedule. And then when October hits, that's when it's going to get really tough. Oh, he's probably out right now. But at 9:15, I'm going to have Chuck Culpepper. He'll be on he's from the Washington Post. And this is not the first time I had Chuck Culpepper on the show before. First time I had Chuck Culpepper was on the air was in 2016. And it appears to me that there may be some issues on Facebook. So that is on Facebook and it's not on the system. So once again, it's on the It's on the Facebook end. It's not on the. It's not our own end. It's on the Facebook. So it looks like he got disconnected. I'm gonna bring him back in. Hold on a sec. All right, let me bring him back in. All right,
we're back.
All right, there we go. We're back.
So as we were saying, so Colorado State and Michigan, week 1, Cade McNamara at the quarterback. Now week 2 coming up, J.J. McCarthy. Let me say this. I think you're going to get these quarterbacks continuing to play. There will be no definite starter announced until
Before the end of October.
Iowa.
Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you my reasoning.
Sure.
Okay. The reason why is because the NCAA has this rule where if you play more than 4 games, then you use up a year of eligibility. Okay? And then it's harder than if you transfer. If you transfer before you play 4 games, then you can keep that year's worth of eligibility. Okay? Well, Michigan is competing for a national title. So let's say Jim Harbaugh decides to announce that J.J. McCarthy is the starting quarterback. You think Cade McNamara is going to stick around and lose a year's worth of eligibility knowing he's going to be the backup? I doubt it, especially when you're in the middle of a title run and then a couple weeks later, let's say after Cade would announce that he's transferring, J.J. gets hurt. Well, now you don't have Cade McNamara to fill in those to come back as the starter. When Michigan's could be on a national title run, possibly. Okay?
All right.
You really want to do that to your team? Or do you want a Spencer Rattler situation that happened last year where, he played, then Caleb Williams became the starter and Spencer transferred to play before playing 4 games to South Carolina. So he kept that year's worth of eligibility. Same thing here going on in this situation. Okay? So that's why I think that a QB1 hasn't been named yet. And I think you're not going to see a quarterback 1 named until the Iowa game. Maybe even after.
Okay. That's a really important game at Iowa.
It's at Iowa. It's not going to be as easy as the Big Ten title game.
Exactly. It's very difficult to beat Iowa at Iowa. It's very difficult.
Because
everybody in the Big Ten knows that.
For Michigan, that place has been a house of horrors. From at least, as far as I can remember, 1985. Because Michigan and Iowa played in a 1-2 game. And Michigan lost, I believe, in a last-second field goal to Iowa. Iowa kicked 4 field goals, if I remember right, as a kid.
I could check that. And
I believe it was 12-10.
Okay.
At Hawkeye Carver Stadium or whatever, Kinnikinnick, whatever they want to call it. I believe that's when Iowa had AstroTurf on their field. You can look it up, but I'm willing to bet I believe it was 12-10. It was Chuck Long at quarterback with Ronnie Harmon for Iowa, and Michigan had Jim Harbaugh and Kelsick, and the rest of that 85 crew. That team did not win the Big Ten. Iowa ended up winning the Big Ten that year. Then the following year, Michigan won the Big Ten, but lost in the Rose Bowl to Arizona State.
Gotcha. But it appears to me go ahead.
Iowa lost to UCLA in the Rose Bowl that year. They got blown out, if I remember right.
That.
So you'd have to look it up. That's how good my memory is as a kid watching those games.
And this was when NBC did the Rose Bowl. It wasn't ABC at the time.
It was it was NBC in those days. NBC still had the Rose Bowl coverage at that time, and back then NBC had the coverage for the Fiesta Bowl also.
And they did the Orange Bowl at the time.
They did the Orange Bowl. They did not do the Cotton Bowl. And
ABC still did the Sugar Bowl.
And ABC did the Sugar Bowl. Yes.
They always been doing the Sugar Bowl.
CBS back in the day had the Cotton Bowl, and ABC had the Sugar Bowl.
Gotcha.
So,
but And it looks like we do have our guest. And ladies and gentlemen, from the Washington Post, this is a very special friend of mine, as him and I are going to talk some college football. Ladies and gentlemen, please would you welcome Mr. Chuck Culpepper to the show. How you doing, Chuck?
All right, how you guys doing? Can you hear
We're
me?
doing good.
Hey.
Welcome to the show,
First time on
Chuck.
video.
By the way, that 12-10 memory was spot on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Right down to the Harbaugh of it.
Hey, I got that memory of games pretty well down. So
Yeah.
appreciate that. So
That was
so
ahead,
Chuck,
Anthony.
let's get some of your initial thoughts here after week one.
Oh, doesn't anybody I get really, really tired of thinking about which conferences are going to expand and whom they're going to poach from other places. And that's like business section talk. And it was all summer long, and obviously USC and UCLA fueled it. So to get to a weekend that had the nutty batch of games that this one had felt to me like some sort of, I don't know, potion or some sort of cure for all the business talk, because it was an astonishing weekend of games. And college football sometimes will have those weekends that are kind of formulaic and mundane, and then they'll have
Like this upcoming week, besides Alabama, Texas.
Right. But I mean, when a lot of times when you look at a week ahead of time as Monday, it ends up being really wild. So last weekend was really wild.
Yes, it was.
Just things you can't explain, and things that go on that just are nuttier than any other sport. And that's what I love about it the most.
Now,
I think one of the biggest things about this weekend, I think, was the way Georgia just completely manhandled
that question.
Oregon, especially considering that the former defensive coordinator of Georgia is now the head coach of Oregon. And Georgia, I mean, I know the game was in Atlanta, but that's a neutral field.
That was a blowout.
Seeing that 46-point blowout, I mean, they probably needed new jerseys at halftime. Did Oregon? They probably need an additional jersey change right now. I thought that was probably the most dominating performance of the weekend, and Jake Fromm just looked like he didn't miss a beat at all.
Well, we all thought that when the NFL came after their defensive players as they did, what was it, 5 in the first round?
Yes.
It's absurd. How could that even be true? So everybody kind of expected, let's see how this goes. They won the title. It's hard to keep it going after you win a title. Maybe you get kind of too happy with it or whatever. And obviously Kirby Smart studied under Nick Saban, so he's not going to be into that too happy kind of deal. But this was just absolutely just so impressive. And, the passing 25 out of 31, is just not the things we expect from them so much sometimes. And
I actually took the over on that player prop for Georgia quarterback. So you should be happy for doing that for anybody that took the over for that.
Yeah, it's but then I have to say that just down the road, I-20 in Tuscaloosa, Utah State went into Alabama, and that's a good program. Utah State, they've done some things in recent years. They won some bowl games and so on. It's good. And for them to lose 55-0 with the first downs at 30-7 and the total yards 559 to 135. I just wrote it down. I had to look at it. But Bryce Young rushing 5 times for 100 yards. I have to say that to me, the weekend felt like that in Los Angeles in January, I'm going to see Alabama and Georgia again. I know that's too fast, but it has that sense to it.
Right. Now, there was a game I did watch that was the Notre Dame and Ohio State. Now, I figured Ohio State was going to win that game. No question about that. But it was a matter of what was CJ Stroud performance was, and I felt like, you know what, I took the under on that one, I won that one, so I got that prediction right. But I just felt like Ohio State's offense wasn't like it was last year.
That's the game I attended, and that was true, and that felt like a very weird several hours going on. We wandered all the way late into the third quarter with Notre Dame still ahead 10-7, and it's one of those deals where, you know, that was Ohio State's was the number one offense in the country last year in yards per play and in total offense per game, you know. And so to watch it kind of get defused like that, I was thinking, I know this guy, Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator now elevated to head coach, 36, is like really, really impressive, hugely impressive, or he wouldn't have gotten that job at 36. But I'm sitting there thinking, you know, I know this guy's got a great football mind, but is it even more spectacular than we thought, you know, which would be off the chart. So,
right.
Let me ask
this
this question about that game on Saturday. So, Ohio State did something to Notre Dame that only Clemson has done twice to Notre Dame in the last 6 years, is hold them to 10 points or under and under 260 yards of total offense. That's what Ohio State did to Notre Dame on Saturday. So they got a new defensive coordinator in the offseason from Oklahoma State, where he revamped the defense at Oklahoma State last year and improved it tenfold, I guess you could say. So with him coming in and changing the system, because Ohio State's coordinators, they were in a real mess last year. With Luke, you know, after they lost Shiano and that crew last year. I mean, Kerry McCombs just never took over last year, and it was a complete mess. So is it more the players, or do you think it's the system? Because, I mean, we did lose some talent. I mean, Cam Brown looks like he might be the new DB of DBU, allegedly. You know, I guess you could argue that with LSU. But can we touch a little bit about that on the Ohio State front? I mean, how much of it was more, do you think, schematics and scheme? And how much do you think of it was all of the 4- and 5-star talent coming back? I mean, were they overtly impressive besides having 12 men on the field on 3rd and goal, which the referees didn't catch? But besides that, can we talk a little bit maybe about the schematics here?
I thought they looked like different people in a way, even the ones who were back from last year. I thought they tackled really well, and I thought they had a confidence about them that, you know, I went to the Oregon game last year and the Michigan game where they got run over both times, giving up, you know, more than 250 rushing yards each time. These were like manhandlings, really. They lost both. And I just thought they were, scheme-wise, supposedly it's much more attack-oriented, this new, you know, in the U.S., $2 million a year will get you a good defensive coordinator. So you know, that's what they did. And I'm always wary of giving too much credit to coaches because I think it's players always. But sometimes when there's a change in philosophy and so on, the players really can sort of demonstrate what they're about. And of course, we also have to factor into that a first-time starting quarterback, his first ever game. It's on the road. Their offense at times looked like it didn't have that much threat to offer. So that's in there too. But it was still, by any call, a really impressive performance by that defense. After a year in which it, you know, worried the fans there to pieces last year.
So let's ask a quick question about Notre Dame. They started the season off 5th nationally. They dropped to 8th nationally. I mean, do you think that's pretty accurate considering they're on the road and lost? Or are they a little bit too young still of deserving that 8th ranking compared, seeing what they have left on the schedule? I mean, it looks pretty cool for Notre Dame. Maybe other game against USC and Clemson. I mean, right now, if I was to guess, they may not win that game against Clemson. but they probably have a
Especially the way
good
Clemson
shot of
played
winning that
yesterday.
game against USC. I mean, I guess you could say, if you were to say right now that maybe a pickup, just in terms of looking at Notre Dame, maybe sneaking into that fourth spot later on, if they can run the gauntlet. I mean, is that kind of accurate maybe to say at this point that you think they can still contend for that fourth spot because they lost on the road to Ohio State and they didn't get blown out and it was early in the season?
I do. And there's two prongs to that. One is that I might have kept them at 5th. If you go into the horseshoe and you play like that and you're right there after 3 quarters, and I might have just kept them at 5th. I like rewarding teams for scheduling like that, so that's one thing. The other part of it is that this committee over the last, now it'll be 9 years, but over the last 8 years has shown much more deference to teams who schedule like that in the non-conference. They really, really weigh that in. They will elevate programs who have done that scheduling as opposed to somebody, and they will dock programs who've scheduled FCS or whatever or in their first 3 games in their non-conference games. So in that light, I do think it's plausible that they get into the playoff.
But they'll have to run the table because probably 2 losses won't be good enough to get in at this point, right? You would be thinking right now.
That's you're right. Independent.
Because my thinking is probably Georgia and Alabama won't play each other till SEC championship week, and maybe you got Texas A&M or some outlier in the SEC that could throw a wrench in that, but doubtful.
Right.
But maybe A&M, but I mean they didn't exactly play like world beaters against San Houston State over the weekend. Maybe they were just playing vanilla and just waiting to really show what they've got, especially after the world's greatest bought recruiting class allegedly ever. So I guess with Alabama and Georgia kind of cementing the whole 1-2 world legacy, Ohio State, Utah losing at Florida, which I don't think was a big shocker. I think Utah plays a lot better on the road with that. Now, a lot of people are going to say, I'm going to jump to the thriller of Sunday night here. I don't think Florida State is back. Yes, it was a nice win over LSU, but LSU, I feel, gave that game away with a lot of turnovers, and it was a welcoming party to Brian Kelly.
And I could have covered that game.
And I'm actually shocked he didn't turn purple on the sidelines like he should.
He kept,
I mean, is that going to be a marriage that's going to last? Because, I mean, he's already got 1 star receiver that looks like he's already wants to go to the transfer portal. I mean, the fake accent. I mean, is this going to last, or did LSU just get themselves in a bigger mess and kind of maybe wishing Ed Orgeron never left?
His facial muscles were really impressive. I thought that they sort of held their form, during some of those plays. But I think you're exactly right. Anytime 2 blocked kicks, a field goal and an extra point, and 2 muffed punts, and you lose by 1, I'm happy. It's great for Florida State. The sport would love to have them back in prominence, but that game did not tell us that they're back in prominence because of the things that happened in it. And then to your question, I just think he's a terrific coach. I really do. I think he's
Mike Norvell you're talking about?
No, I'm talking Kelly now. Yeah. I just think Kelly is just way, way up there. I remember I called his quarterback from his Central Michigan days. This is 20 years ago.
I remember. Yeah, when he was a hot commodity at Central, I thought Michigan might have was going to maybe make a move because they were looking for a coach. And that was going on after the whole Rich Rod fiasco and that. So that's kind of stayed his tenure. I thought he was going to be a real possible candidate, and that Notre Dame came in because those Central Michigan teams had a lot of talent and did a lot of good work in those days. They were probably the best MAC team in the MAC during his coaching stay in terms of development, which, obviously later on, it always seems like one of those two Michigan teams, either Central or Western, always seems to be when one is higher, the other one's kind of lower. But that one coach always seems to move on to a dominant leading program later on for those reasons. So after this weekend, is the Pac-12 pretty much dead besides USC after this weekend in terms of the CFP after one weekend?
I think what we just said about Notre Dame, we could say the same thing about Utah. And I think if Utah runs from here, that they will be they can get into the playoff because they dared to schedule in the swamp at Gainesville, as opposed to losing a game that might have been more, they were kind of in the mix in recent years, with I'm trying to think of the season. I think it's 2019 with less of an impressive loss, so to speak, than that one. So I think Utah and USC. I think Oregon might be gone, but I think
I can see that happening.
Utah, USC,
I believe, is it this week or next week that USC and Oregon play in Utah? Because that game's going to have a lot of ramifications, I think, for the Pac-12. I mean, whoever wins that game is going to have a lot of say-so. I mean, that's a statement game for USC. I mean, if USC doesn't win at Utah, then everybody in that conference has pretty much got a loss.
Yeah.
I mean, does the national media just decide to shift everything, basically to the Mississippi River and east at this point? Because
that's kind of where we've gotten anyway. We kind of have lost that part of the country. They haven't been in a playoff since the 15-16 or the 16-17 season.
Wow.
It's been a long time. Yeah. Washington was the last one in there.
I was like, they didn't even have an NFL football team over there back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, USC plays Stanford this Saturday. Just want to
that should be interesting. The following week is that USC at Utah game, I believe.
Okay.
I think playing at Utah is no easy task. Right. I mean, Michigan went in there in Harbaugh's first game and lost at Utah. Right. So hey, it's not an easy place to compete at. So
and how do we factor in the conference issue too into that game?
Exactly. So let's get to the Big 12 here a little bit.
Thank you.
Quinn Ewers won the starting job, mullet and all, and has become the starting quarterback at Texas. And obviously they won this past weekend. And obviously Alabama won. And those two have a big game against each other on Saturday. And Steve Sarkisian is quoted as, this game's not going to make or break the program, but it's probably the biggest game in the program since he's become head coach, even more so than the Red River shootout against Oklahoma. What would be success for Texas, even if they lose? Just keeping it close, considering Sarkisian is kind of known as the king of 5-7.
I think if they might not even need to keep it close. It'll matter how it looks. The spread on this thing, I just looked at one of them, is 19.5, and that's just really something, And that yesterday I was at the Texas,
especially for Alabama scheduling a non-conference game actually that is not at a neutral site,
right?
Because normally during the Saban era, minus a game at Penn State, I can't remember, which was already signed off on before he became head coach. I can't remember of a non-conference game Alabama has played under his reign that hasn't been at a neutral site stadium.
Great question.
I can't remember one.
In Atlanta.
It's very hard. You probably have to do a lot of research.
Yeah, they're always in Atlanta or in Dallas at
Dallas,
neutral site. You never see them play a non-conference game of a caliber opponent on the road. I mean, that Penn State game was an exception, but that was signed under an old athletic director and signed under the under the Shula regime, who he took over as head coach. So, I mean, that shows you how long ago that was signed, because that was when Penn State and Alabama had that home and home series, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 19.5-point favorites on the road. I mean,
too much.
Texas, since the Mac Brown era, the late Mac Brown era, because, during the prime of the Mac Brown era, Texas was in Oklahoma were getting everybody, and then, Saban came in and things pretty much changed. The tide shifted from Texas and Oklahoma back more, I guess, to the SEC. I mean, if they get blown out Saturday, are we looking at another Charlie Strong here?
Oh, boy.
Well, here's the thing. This malaise or whatever it is that has gone on for so long now, 12 years since they played Alabama in the Rose Bowl, that I think you always have to wonder that. And it's Charlie Strong and then Tom Herman. And I was convinced that Tom Herman was going to make that.
Hey, I'm with you there. I thought Tom Herman was going to be the guy that was going to turn that around, coming from Ohio State, going to Houston, turn that thing around lightning quick. And then, came into Texas, loaded with some Texas pedigree. I thought that was a slam dunk, and it didn't happen.
No.
So, I mean, it's Steve Sarkisian. He can get the quarterbacks. We know he can recruit quarterbacks. But there's more than just recruiting a quarterback. It's great that you can get Ewers and Arch Manning to come. But is that all he's going to be able to do? I mean, is he another David Cutcliffe to just do the quarterbacks but can't do anything else?
I think we've reached the point where the situation at Texas might not reflect the caliber of any of the coaches who go there. It might be that sort of situation where, I mean, you could do college dissertations on why it hasn't worked for so long. And it's amazing with the research, the resources, excuse me. But with the resources, it's astounding that it's gone on as long as it has. So now we're on the end of the Brown tenure, plus Strong, plus Herman, plus that 5-7 last year with Stark, where they lost.
Plus his record at USC, during the infamous drinking era at the end.
Yeah. So I'm what I wonder about it is, and you may have the guess absolutely right about quarterbacks and Cutcliffe and so on. But what I wonder about it is if it fails again with this one after they ran Herman out, does it reflect on him so much, or does it reflect on some part of the program, maybe too many cooks in the kitchen or something like that of the
athletic boosters, the athletic department, right, to some degree, because they got some influence to some degree. Why doesn't it
work? It should work. Why doesn't it work?
So. Speaking of Texas and speaking of Oklahoma, especially now that they've lost Lincoln Riley, are they going to be able to compete in the SEC in a year and a half? I mean, is Texas going to become possibly Missouri, and is Oklahoma going to become the Florida of now, not the Florida of Urban Meyer? Because I mean, it's a whole different landscape coming from the Big 12 to the big boys of the SEC. I mean, you're not playing Baylor, and you're not going to be able to afford to give up 35 points and win games when you scored 38, because these teams are going to be way better on both ends. I mean, are these teams going to be able to handle that jump, especially considering Oklahoma of the last 5 years really hasn't been able to recruit defense, and Texas we've just talked about?
I think that Oklahoma-Florida comparison might be really, really good. I think that idea of, and it would be hard for Oklahoma fans to get used to, that idea of that they've been in 4 playoffs out of the 8, and that they're not going to be in 4 playoffs out of the first 8. Well, we're going to 12
Well,
teams.
now that they've expanded to 12, would they still have an opportunity to do that?
Yeah.
But not under the format of 4. But
Under the format of 4, no way.
Exactly.
I would
going to
venture
say
that if it were still 4, they would make 1 out of 8 at most. Yeah. So,
I mean,
now, go ahead.
Go ahead, Shawn.
Okay. Now, let's say Texas and Oklahoma is going to leave, right? So since those 2 teams are going to leave in the Big 12, who do you think is going to be the future of the Big 12? Which team you think like could be like the future of the Big 12? And do you think like it could be over for that conference?
No, I think it'll exist in a viable way. Probably the 5th best of the 4th best of the Power 5. It's going to add those new 4 teams. What is it? BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. And
I think UCF is going to benefit the most out of that move. I really do.
And I am so high on Baylor's coach, Dave Aranda. I just think this guy, and they're playing at BYU in probably the most interesting game of this weekend, I think.
Dave Aranda, to me, I was actually shocked that he was passed over for the LSU job. I think they messed up there because – Dave Aranda, when he was the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, he was a stud. I mean, he didn't have a lot of talent at Wisconsin defensively. I mean, I live in Wisconsin. I'm a Michigan, but I see enough Badgers football that it's toxic for me, and I got to deal with all of that stuff.
Right.
But he made that defense look great. And Jim Leonard should send him a big thank you for giving him that system and that coaching when he left to let Leonard jump up and take a lot of those dynamics that he's been able to keep within the system there. Even though last year maybe didn't reflect it because that defense last year at Wisconsin was below average for them. But so Dave Aranda went from Wisconsin, got paid boatloads of money to be the defensive coordinator at LSU, and LSU won a natty. Okay, I mean they had the offensive talent, but the man transformed that. You got to remember that LSU team had talent, but not the system. And then they didn't have a quarterback till Joe Burrow. They can thank Ohio State for that. Right. And because the 2 things LSU can always recruit: wide receivers and DBs. So Dave Aranda transformed that, and then he left for Baylor, and then things took a dump. And he went to Baylor, and then Ed Orgeron, left his wife, got a hot girlfriend, is now not coaching at LSU. and gotta love that TikTok pic. Right. And now you got Brian Kelly there, and that transition. I think it's gonna take a little time because I just don't know if they're gonna trust him for the. I thought Dave Aranda was a shoo-in to get that LSU job, and he didn't, and he's at Baylor. I mean, to me, I think Baylor is well coached, and I'm actually shocked a bigger school hasn't come after Dave Aranda. I think he's one of the most underrated head coaches in America, and if Michigan ever decided to Harbaugh retired or something, that guy would probably be near the top of my list for a head coach. I just think it's almost amazing what Baylor has done, even after the Art Briles scandal, that they didn't take as near of a fall as they probably should have. And I think that's a testament to the athletic department and Aranda. I mean, they went through a little bit of a downfall, but I mean, it could have been a lot worse in this era, in this transfer portal era. So, Chuck, your thoughts maybe on Baylor here a little bit?
Well, remember Matt Rule too, who did a fantastic job there.
Yes, he did.
Before he took the
Carolina. So I'm just so completely impressed with Aranda. And one thing, he's got a different cadence to him and a different way about him. Doesn't feel like a coach when you're in the room, in the press conference room with him, whatever. And I feel like that might make it where he's one of these guys who might just like where he is, and there's something about him that makes me think LSU might have been, that's a place when you're the head coach. That's a different kind of job than it is even Michigan that's a big time job can be really, really nutty. So I think if he sticks at Baylor, and I think he's a better bet to do that than a lot of guys who would be having this success. And then I think if that happens, Baylor in the Big 12, and then maybe nationally is going to be an interesting dynamic going on.
Let me ask you a question. That I guess is on the forefront. How much do you think administrations right now are affecting NIL? I'll give you an example. Michigan, okay, compared to a more open university to policies like Alabama or Georgia, maybe politically speaking to some degree. Obviously, Michigan now hired a more pro-sports president / chancellor and Santa Ono, who was Cincinnati's president and chancellor, and he was very pro-sports. He was very pro-sports compared to anti-sports compared to the previous presidents at Michigan.
Yeah.
How much of a factor do you think that's going to help Michigan in terms of NIL and recruiting now by finally getting a more vocal advocate for sports like Santa Ono and that's compared to previous more academia, not as friendly to sports presidents and your dealings with as long as you've been writing?
I think
and covering games and sports.
I think that's one aspect that actually hasn't changed in terms of if you have the supportive president, your sports are going to benefit. And I think the thing that has changed is that before, if you had a president who didn't really like sports, he or she might put a clamp on the boosters, who were giving the money in a way we didn't know about. So now I think if you have it like that, he or she might not like, the NIL to run wild with the place or whatever. That's just my perception there is that it can only help the sports to have a president who thinks it's important. And I think that's the same as it was. I really do. Yeah.
Now, which games are you going to be covering this weekend? Where are you going to this weekend? Which game?
Austin.
So you're going to Austin to the big walk down there this weekend.
That's a Fox game.
Yeah.
Big noon kickoff.
Yeah. Now, from what I've heard, Texas and Alabama both were not happy that this is going to be an 11 o'clock start because of the Fox TV contract.
Exactly.
With that,
it's just wrong. Yeah.
Because that game should be more of a prime time game, but because of the Fox TV contract with that is basically made that a muggy 11 o'clock game for this weekend.
Yeah.
With that, and there's no way that Fox was even willing to move it, which they probably should have tried to work out, I feel, without losing the game. But then you got to deal with the other networks not willing to agree to move on their time slots either.
Yeah.
With that. Do you know was there any conversations that you heard of trying to work with other networks to try to move that time slot, but keep it on Fox? Because you knew they weren't going to give that game up.
Nothing I've heard. I mean, you're right. That game belongs either at 3:30 or 7:30. I'm talking Eastern time now.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing I've heard. And I was at the Texas press media availability yesterday, and it never even came up. Subject of 11 a.m. never even came up. So, and your question has just reminded me that it never came up. I didn't even think about it later that day, even as I'm thinking I'm not sure if it came up with Saban yesterday. But when he met over in Tuscaloosa with the reporters. So yeah, it's funny how we've all gotten so used to something crazy like that as being routine.
I mean, how often do you see Alabama playing a prime game if you're playing, like, whatever cupcake that the SEC plays in that week in November, that when they all play the cupcake teams, it seems like tradition, the 1 week where cupcake week is, that is an 11 o'clock game. But how often do you see Alabama play a prime opponent with that much exposure at 11 a.m. Central, 12 noon? Plus, I don't know what the weather is going to be down there, but I was in Austin in early August, and it was 106 degrees at the pool, and my feet felt like bacon was cooking when I was walking 10 feet to the pool.
Are you talking Oscar Mayer bacon?
And Oscar Mayer, Jimmy Dean. I mean, you could hear the little pops going. So what's the anticipated weather going to be? Do you know, or have you seen that? And are the players going to be able to handle that for an 11 o'clock game this week, especially, in terms of hydration, if that heat is going to still be at those kind of levels?
Yeah, I've looked at it. It looks like a 93 or 94 kind of deal.
Ooh. So the field level might be over 100 degrees because of all that heat coming down. How are they going to keep these players hydrated without cramps? Or do these teams have special techniques that, like drinking pickle juice allegedly helps? Anything else? No, seriously, pickle juice has a hydration factor, which helps actually. And drinking chocolate milk also helps also. So I don't know what these teams have, but I mean, will that play matter if it's a close game? I mean, chances are, if it goes what the odds makers are saying, 19 points. But I'm just saying, if it's closer, it could come down to that. But, is Texas better than they were last year?
Yes, I think so. Well, we don't know yet, because one of the themes, first of all, I'll say about the 94 degrees, high temperatures don't usually kick in until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So maybe it'll be 89, 90 when the game is played. But Texas last year looked good in its first game too, just like it did this year. And then went to Arkansas the second game, got just clobbered, and then went 4-1 and then lost 6 in a row. So that was part of the talk yesterday at their session was, we're kind of right back where we were with them, and we don't know how good they are, and we don't really have any idea. So I think it's a good question. I think the quarterback, Quinn Ewers, who went to Ohio State and came back to there, and
Xavier Worthy, who's a stud.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a monster game. The defense is going to have to pull some miracles to keep this thing close.
I think one thing that might help is it's so unusual for them to be a 19-point underdog at home, especially. I think one of the things that hurts them through the years, no matter who's playing for them, is this sort of sense of entitlement, of being Texas, of being, what was it a few years ago? One of their players was talking about Baylor as still their little brother. I mean, come on. That's the kind of thing that I wonder if it hurts them to some degree. And that won't be the case this week. So I kind of do expect that they might play better than we all expect because of that.
Now, where can my listeners find you on social media, Chuck?
Twitter, it's at Chuck Culpepper in the numeral 1. Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Chuck. It was a pleasure having you on. It's 30 minutes long, but it was a great 30 minutes. I appreciate it. Me and you.
I'd definitely love to have you back on again, Chuck. This is really
exactly.
going to take time.
Thanks to you both. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Think about November. I'm thinking about November.
Well, you know where I'll be in November? Qatar. So.
Oh, you're going to the World Cup?
If you want to talk the round ball, I'll be available in November.
I can talk round ball all day with you. I love soccer, but my team did not make the World Cup.
Italy?
Yep. I'm a huge Italy fan. They did not make. So now I'm rooting for Canada.
It's not a complete World Cup without Italy, ever.
Let me tell you, I was ecstatic, and I probably overspent on Italy gear in terms of Puma purchases after we won Euro 2021.
Hey.
And
Oh, right. Of course.
After losing to North Macedonia, I was depressed
He was
in a
crushed.
coma for a couple of weeks. So I'm still
Oh,
recovering right now. The only good thing is that the women's team made the World Cup. The Italian women's team made the World Cup today in the Women's World Cup. So, hey, at least somebody actually won their group against Switzerland. Because Switzerland won in women's soccer 15-0 today against Moldova. But that's a whole nother story. I follow way too much sports, Chuck, but I do love soccer. So we should definitely bring you in for the World Cup when we get closer to that, because I'm a soccer hound. We can talk CPI, EPL, transfer windows. We can talk about that all day along with college football.
Okay.
Great. We look forward to have you in November. I'm planning on doing that.
From the Middle East, maybe. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you both so much.
Hey, there's no alcohol in the beer out there, from what I heard. So
in the hotels, yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, at least you get some type of booze out there.
Right.
You may need it if the USA has a rough time in that group. But hey, Chuck, thanks a lot for having us, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
Be well, and thank you so much. Thank you.
All right,
You're
thanks,
very
Chuck.
welcome. All right. Yeah, I didn't even know that. You can't even have alcohol, in the Middle East. Wow.
Well, it's the Middle East, and you think for a FIFA, you know who's going to be hurting is the Germans and the the English. How are you not going to be able to go to the Middle East and drink? You know how rowdy those fans are.
That makes
I'm hoping, man, you might see some of those fans in prison for like 4 years or something. 5 years. I mean, you ever go to a soccer game in Europe and see how crazy it is and the hooliganism? I mean, it's a whole different world going over there. I'm a little worried for the fans over there. Chuck brings up a really good point about the alcohol with that. And that's another topic for another show. Right. And we should definitely bring Chuck back, because I had an excellent fun time
that was
talking
a very
with
great
him.
conversation.
But we should bring him back for like a World Cup special or something, because I can just tell his talking just brings a really good, unique perspective to the show here. So I'm really glad we had Chuck on. And I thank him for that. So we have a little bit of time. We have a little bit of time left.
We have time.
So let's get those player props. Yep. Why don't you go ahead and give them to me?
Props. It is the SuperDraft MLB player props, and fans, you can get along as well, by the way. All right.
SuperDraft?
Right. Exactly. All right. So here's
Read
the
them
first
off
one. We have, doggone it, Atlanta Braves starting pitcher Kyle Wright, 1.5 ERA against the Oakland A's.
I will go with the under on that, because, man, he's been pitching like crazy lately, and the A's aren't that good.
All right,
they can't even draw flies to their games. But anyways, their minor league team gets better attendance. Anyways, keep going.
The LA Angels starting pitcher Mike Mayer, 4.5 hits allowed against the Detroit Tigers.
I'll take the over. The Tigers are due. And the Angels aren't that good.
Exactly. Tigers are done anyway. The next one we have Colorado Rockies first baseman CJ Cron, 1.5 bases against the Milwaukee Brewers.
I'll take the over as long as he's starting. I mean, the pitching matchup I think is a little bit favorable as long as Cron is completely healthy. I'll take the over and play.
Okay. All right, here's the next one. It is San Diego Padres starting pitcher Joe Musgrove, 5.5 strikeouts against the Arizona Diamondbacks.
I'll take the over.
All right. LA Dodgers now, as they're going to be playing the San Francisco Giants first baseman Freddie Freeman, 1.5 bases.
It's Freddie Freeman. Got to take the over as long as he's starting and it's healthy.
Gotcha. All right, next one. It is Mookie Betts, 1.5 against the Giants. That's the last one.
All Mookie needs is a walk and a stolen base. I'll take the over.
All right. And by the way, you can scan that QR code as you can see on the right. So if you have a mobile phone, I recommend you put it in full screen so that way the phone can scan that QR code. And if you have a tablet, it'll able to scan as well. And if you have any questions about SuperDraft and SuperDraft Pro, you can email me at Shawn.Stewart@sportsforamerica.com. So the QR code you see right there is for the SuperDraft Pro, where you can subscribe to SuperDraft. So it's superdraft.io, by the way. And I'll put that link, by the way.
Super draft.
And also, beginning at 9:55 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to be doing a live reaction of the NFL Fantasy Football Draft on Sports for America. This is the first time that's ever going to happen. I'm very excited as well.
Shawn, you didn't title it right.
Okay, I'll type.
You did not title it right. Can I give the official title of this?
Please do.
It should actually be called the Anthony Paulis 2022 NFL Fantasy Football Victory Championship Tour.
Oh, my heavens.
That's what it should be called, because after my draft tonight, it's going to be world domination. And I'll invite you to the ticker tape parade in my neighborhood after I win, Shawn. How about that?
So
you want to throw? I'll even let you throw some confetti from a house on me. You know.
Oh my gosh. So yeah. So it will be tonight at 9:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're gonna have a great time, and you're gonna actually see the draft board on NFL.com. So
Ray Finkel, number one pick, everybody. Ray Finkel.
All right, so you guys have a nice, safe night. So we'll see you at 9:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.
Championship tour, baby. It starts tonight.